how do you want me to introduce you?
Guru Ameen.
The impact.
Living in our memory.
Hey guys, good to have you in. Today we have a really special treat. One of my friends from actually quite a few years ago, and one of the original gurus, maybe the original guru in bodybuilding. We have Guru Ameen with us today. And Ameen is basically going to cut it loose. And we are calling this Ameen Uncensored. So today we're going to talk about a lot of subjects from Boston Lloyd, Rich Piana. We're going to talk about Ameen, who he is, what he's been going through, and all of the other stuff that's going on, even in the world today, man. We have had some great conversations the last 2 days, Ameen. And so let's get started. Ameen, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Good to see you again, by the way.
Man.
Excellent. Yeah, I started bodybuilding when I was 13 years old to overcome being bullied really bad. I was probably the smallest kid in all the schools that I was in, so I was an easy target. And I was, getting into trouble doing some stupid things like smoking cigarettes, stuff like that. Parents caught me, sent me to military school for a couple of years, got my ass beat there, and decided, look, I'm in an all-boys boarding military school. I better do something about this or I'm not going to survive the school. So I started hitting the gym. And I really turned myself into a teenage bodybuilding champion. At 17 years old, I did the Mr. Metro competition in the DC area. I won the 17-year-old division, teenage overall division, adult short class. It was an AAU competition, so there was AAU short and tall. And I was 1 point decision from a guy 20 years older than me for the overall. And
Wow.
he was 37. I was 17. Never happened in the history of the AAU for that type of difference. He was better than me. I was my first show, but I did really good. And then went further on to compete in the NPC a week after my 19th birthday, won the novice, won the open overall, competed against David Lieberman, who from Ohio, who won the overall. And I was in him for the overall at 19 years old, winning the biggest show and in the DC metro area. And everybody knew I was the underdog because I was a teenager doing the open class. But I earned everyone's respect that night. Amateur at that time bodybuilder Don Long, who was working out at my gym, approached me, asked me for help. I started helping him. Shortly after that, around the same time, King Kamal and I had been friends. We were growing up in the same area. He already had come to me asking me for help, so I was already helping Kamali. Then Don Long. Shortly after that, Tony Freeman, Craig Titus. And then a lot of other bodybuilders in the 90s, like Al Q. Gurley, even Juan Marquez. It was a shorter blonde guy. I think you remember him, the blonde myth. And really got to start developing the system they call Peak Week now. I think they're saying that I'm the first person to start a Peak Week, and my Peak Week was called Hell Week, and it was my version of what carb depletion should be. What I was realizing was people weren't really depleting the muscles enough to carb up. So they were spilling over a lot and they couldn't really time it right. So I came through with this depletion that really depleted you so that when you carved up, you actually had to eat some restaurant food to finally fill out. And I came up with a system and it worked. And it worked actually better on everybody that I did it on than it did on me. And because I didn't have the best genetics, but it worked for me. And I thought myself, look, I'm going to beat everyone. I got this system. No one's got it. I'm going to take them. But then the reality of genetics kicked in, and I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at Don, I'm looking at Kamali, and I'm like, there's no way I can overcome this small frame that I was born in. I may look good right now, but the best I'll ever be is an amateur middleweight. I just knew it. I don't have what it takes to be a pro. I did really well, for myself, my personal transformation. And at that point right there, I decided to give up my ego and then put my attention into helping others. And I got known as being the original guru of bodybuilding, dubbed by King Kamali, and put in magazines, Flex Magazine, Muscle Magazine, Iron Magazine, back in the day. And really, that's what took off after that, because there was a large gap where social media wasn't around from the 90s to, when 2000, when it came around, social media picked it back up. I contacted this guy, Tony Huge. You might know who he is, from Enhanced Athlete. I saw he was doing some things back then that I was kind of interested in. He seemed like a version of what I do. I was experimenting, figuring things out. He seemed kind of the same thing. So contacted him. Enhanced Athlete was really on the rise back then. And this is before SARMs were really illegal. And so they were really selling a lot of SARMs and stuff like that. I never got involved with the selling of SARMs. I never really was too impressed with SARMs personally. But I like the fact that, there was this guy who was trying to find out about these things. This is, before he moved to Thailand. We did some videos. They got very popular, got back on RX Muscle, been friends with Dave since the 95 Junior Nationals, where he won and my client won the female bodybuilding division.
Right.
And started getting an RX Muscle, and then becoming known again, doing videos. One of the videos I did was with Boston. That video got over 100,000 views, and it was a very good video because it gave people different views on what an older person who came up in this industry, who had done everything and had seen it from my perspective, and then looking at this younger guy coming up with a very big following, and seeing how charismatic he was and how influential he was. And I was trying to talk to him to kind of steer him away from what he was doing, because I saw that this is a bad direction that he was headed in, and I noticed that right away. And I kind of wanted to
tell us a little bit about, and forgive me for interrupting you there, you were friends with Boston.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just did a podcast with his mom, Marie, about this documentary that's coming out, or is actually out now, about Boston. Tell us about Boston. And then tell us how Boston and Rich Piana kind of tied in. I believe you knew both those guys. Tell us about those guys, but start with Boston, because you were good friends with him. And tell us, just like you were beginning to, tell us about, where you were with him, how you tried to mentor him or help him, and what happened with all of that.
So the way I met Boston was I contacted Dave and asked Dave if he would, we could do a debate with Boston, and he set it up. And then Boston and I kind of got introduced to each other through RX Muscle. Mm-hmm. Then I went to go see Dave in the studio to do RX Muscle about 3 years ago. And during that time, I had contacted Boston. I had went down to do the show with this guy, Leo from Leo and Longevity. And that was the first time that Leo was going to be introduced to the bodybuilding world. Him and his wife came and visited me in Colorado over that winter. And then we decided to work together, and they were going to help me bring my YouTube channel back while I was dealing with my stepson, who was at that time dying of cancer.
Right.
And so when I went down to Florida, I was going to meet with Boston. We were quite friends that time. And actually, that was the moment where Leo had intervened and told me not to talk to Boston anymore, because Boston really wasn't my friend, and how Boston was going to make some post or make some comment that was going to be derogatory, and I shouldn't do it. And not realizing what was happening, what he was doing was he was actually intervening, putting me out of the picture, and then he was joining with Boston. That happened. They became a team. I didn't want to work with Leo anymore for some personal reasons. I think everybody now realizes that he wasn't very mentally stable. And then he got a hold of Boston, and that was actually very sad to me, because I realized that now somebody who I didn't trust his knowledge was going to be giving a friend of mine knowledge. And then he turned Boston from being a friend of mine into being somewhat of like an enemy, actually. And he did this with quite a few different people to try to like stir up things. He tried to get my friends not to like me, say lies about me and lies about my family and my history that weren't true, that everybody knows weren't true. But the new people who didn't know me, who don't know who I am, they're listening to these people, and they were like, it's easy to say someone's not real. All you got to do is say that they're fake or something like that and just discredit them. So they were just trying to discredit me. And then lo and behold, it's unfortunate, but both of them are no longer with us. And I think it's something that we do need to talk about today. And I think that's kind of the reason that we are here At the same time, at that time, Boston was very popular. Tying this in with Rich, whose birthday would have been yesterday. He would have been 53 yesterday. I never met Rich. I just saw his rise to fame on YouTube and noticed that him and Boston also got into it. And the funny thing is that we had two people that were almost like identical in what they were doing. They were doing internet, they were getting a following, they were doing some crazy things, they were talking about it, people were listening to them, and people were taking their advice. And so when they kind of got into it, both of their followings really grew bigger. And right. and Boston really was at that point convinced that his Team 3cc was a valid thing, that he was right, and what he was doing was something he should teach other people and talk to other people about all the different drugs that he was using and the amounts of drugs that he was using and the ways that he was going about them. And I think that it was that era where we were already talking about cruising and blasting. It wasn't anymore about, going on and going off. Like it really was. I mean, all the way up until probably like the late 90s or the early 2000s, maybe even, most the bodybuilders that were successful went off at least once a year. I mean, at least once a year. That was just the standard thing. Usually after the Olympia, most of the bodybuilders went off over the winter. And then most of them, if they were going to do the Arnold Classic, they would get ready for the Arnold, take a short break after the Arnold, and then get ready for the Olympia. That's how it was. Okay. Then there was a big YouTube blast about people, Boston being one of them, talking about just taking steroids for the full year, taking trend for a year. That every day, 700 milligrams, the 100 milligrams a day, putting it on YouTube and not, just not knowing what's going to happen, but also not caring, and just showing people this arrogance of being able to abuse drugs and then openly tell everybody that you're addicted to steroids, and yet still somehow manage to captivate an audience and have them believe that their success is going to be tied into their use of drugs, which should be like yours. Because if you can do it with the use of these drugs like you did, then sure enough, any average Joe can. Because what he was claiming was, I'm not, anyone can do this. You just take these drugs and you're going to be like this. And that's not really true. It's just not. I'll never be you. There's nothing I could take in my life that would ever make me as big as you. And I think that's the problem. A lot of people get into this. They start thinking that, and for example, I took steroids at 15. When I took steroids, they weren't illegal. As a matter of fact, it was kind of like, it wasn't even a big deal. It was just like, you go to the gym. If you want to, no one really put it on you, but if you want to bodybuild, you go to the bodybuilder. What do you do? Oh, you take these things and you get ready for a show. It was just kind of like that. You diet, you eat, take these things. And then it seemed that somehow things kind of got out of control when the UGL started really popping up. And people started buying the raws from China and started making it themselves. And then what you had winners of local shows becoming coaches, and they were dealers that were coaching, that were dealing the stuff that they were getting from China, having their own clients, and then hence TCC move forward, where you have, take 3 cc's of whatever. Come to find out, the guy that he was getting his stuff from got busted, and all the stuff that they would tested, everything was like half dosed. So even Team 3cc was, in actuality, was only Team CC and a half.
Yeah. And a lot of stuff is just dirty too. Let's just be honest. And one of the things that's, that I talk about on this channel is the warning. I look at all the videos that Boston put out, and, what Boston chose to do to himself, sadly, was Boston's choice. What Rich Piana did to himself was Rich's choice, right? And so those were their choices. The problem is when you put it out for consumption, then now it's indiscriminate who consumes it.
Right.
And so now we've got, kids that have been on drugs for how long now, because they were watching those videos years ago, and they're still taking drugs based on what they learned from guys like Rich or Boston or any of these other channels that educate you on drugs. Now, the one thing that, people go, well, Jeff, why are you mad, or why are you at war with bodybuilding? You and I talked yesterday. I'm not at war with bodybuilding. I enjoy bodybuilding. I've done it my entire life pretty much. I enjoy it. What I am at war with is this modern iteration that puts out all of the content on how to do the drug, which is new, by the way,
Right.
since the advent of social media. Now, all of a sudden, everybody feels like it's their responsibility to educate people on how to take the drug safely. I don't remember so many guys dying years ago because they didn't know how to. Now, maybe I'm just naive and we didn't hear about it. But the issue for me is it's indiscriminate knowledge. You know, a 12-year-old, and I've told this story. I've had kids and I've interviewed a ton of kids that I'll be putting this video out here soon. Once I get the rest of the parents to sign these releases for their young people to be on this video. But all these kids that are consuming where they're finding drug information, a lot of it is YouTube, a lot of it is other forums and social things like that, social media. They're finding this stuff and they're doing it based on what they're learning on people's channels, all of this other stuff. And, you know, and people go, oh, well, you know, we need to educate, we need to be responsible, all of this stuff. Well, I'm not sure how it's responsible information when we're pumping out stuff to where a 12-year-old can indiscriminately find it and start taking trend, because he can get online, go get trend, and then take the 30-day trend challenge, which we see a lot of going on right now, which is unbelievable to me. And
I mean, even with alcohol and tobacco, I mean, kids, it's accessible to kids, but they know that they're not supposed to use it until 18, 21, you know, they know that. With these things, it's almost like, I mean, you're dangling
it's
in front
of go for it mentality.
It's a go for it mentality where you're dangling in front of a weak kid a carrot that can make him grow, and all he has to do is put that needle in himself. And as we were saying before, you know, kids don't really understand the repercussion now of what you go through psychologically to accept that you're going to put a needle in your body.
Yeah.
It may seem trivial now, but the truth is once you go through that, once you let your mind say it's okay to put a needle in you, where does that end? And we were talking about a lot.
You've crossed the Rubicon, man.
I mean, crossed it then, you know, and then now, you know, well, you've taken a needle intramuscular, sub-Q is no problem. So now growth is no problem. Peptides are no problem. Insulin is no problem. Now you cross that door. What could be next? For a lot of bodybuilders in the 90s, there was a popular drug called Nubain. I used to use it myself. I had an addiction to it. It was an opiate that used in the hospital for burn victims or birth for women. And bodybuilders, it was kind of popular because you could take it and push through your workout and not really feel the pain, not feel the pain of dieting, the hunger pain, and so forth. And you know, I was the one of the coaches who coached Craig Titus, and unfortunately, I introduced him to Nubain, and I know myself that if he'd never taken the needle and putting it in his vein, then maybe what we see of him now would have never happened. Maybe he would have never gotten to the point where he had committed that murder or was involved with any of that. You know, we have to take all these things into consideration. Again, once you pass that and you take the needle, you're sacrificing a part of your integrity by saying that you're going to accept that you need something else to get you happy. I need to look like this to be happy. And then you worship the altar of the drug instead of being confident in yourself. And that's the big difference between, you know, someone who's natural and someone who's not. And a lot of times you're going to hear, and this is the case, especially with younger kids, because they're already producing a lot of testosterone, is that, you know, they say that their strength gains got less when they took the steroids. And a lot of them, they got more lax. So, well, I'm getting this great, so I can eat a little shittier here, you know, do this, not train as hard. And, you know, when you're doing that and then taking drugs, now you're sacrificing your work ethic too. So what was it really for? Was it so you could cheat and not work as hard? And then now you're learning that it's a cheating thing. Oh, so I can get away with not having to train as hard and still look really good, because I don't want to be a pro bodybuilder. I just want to look good on YouTube, so I can get away with that, right? And now it just becomes about cheating yourself to look a certain way, and you're cheating lives off your year. And the main reason I'm saying this is I just turned 50, okay, and I'm very healthy. I've gotten myself screened. I'm very healthy. I've done growth. I've done insulin. I've taken pretty much all the steroids. I don't think there's one I haven't really taken. I've tried them all. Okay. But I went off, and I do some testosterone replacement. Sometimes I'm not on it right now. Okay. But I went off, and I would take HCG and Clomid, get myself back to normal, have my testosterone working normal, make sure my testicles were back to normal, and we're off. And I would accept it. Look, I'm off. And that means I'm not going to look as good. So I'll just put a sweater. I'll train with a sweatshirt or something like that. And I'm still going to train. I'm still going to do what I got to do. But I'll just unveil myself when the contest is closer. And that's the way we thought. We didn't think anything of it. Tell me, am I wrong? Isn't that how you did it?
No, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And somewhere along the line comes these people that are like, oh, no, you got to bridge and cruise. Now, all these people that are bridging and cruising, not one of them could be competitive on a stage. Their receptors are so worn out from just constantly being on steroids. People don't understand that if you take 200 to 300 milligrams, then you desensitize yourself to that. So now you really got to take like 1,000 when you're on just to have it work. Whereas before, if you went completely off, if you went on and you were taking 750, it was incredible. I mean, it worked really good. So, there's a big difference in the mentality, and that mentality is dangerous when we're talking about, especially when we're talking about these drugs aren't pure. We're buying powders from China that are raw. Who knows what's in those powders? It could be a matter of time before they put some poison in there. You really don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
There are probably heavy metals, and there are probably small poisons in there that we just don't recognize, that we just taking. And so when you get a guy who's giving you a bottle of something, he made that in his house or something. How can you trust the sterility of that? I mean, the drugs that we were doing were all pharmaceutical. The first stuff you took was D-ball. When you told me how your mom found it, when you were younger, she's finding pharmaceutical drugs. These days, when their parents finding their stuff, they're finding like knockoff pharmaceuticals. They're not even real pharmaceuticals. They're trying to look it up, and they're not even finding out what it is, or they're finding out what the name is on the label, but they're not seeing this isn't made anymore. Like Trenbolone's not made anymore. No pharmaceutical company makes it, and there's a reason why. It's not really for human consumption, because they found that it could be carcinogenic. It could cause cancer. That's why they discontinued Parabolin in France. It was all because it could be carcinogenic. Could be, could not be, who knows? Is it necessary? No. Chris Bumstead says he doesn't use it anymore. So is it necessary? Now, do you have to be an internet YouTuber telling people to take Tren for a whole year so you can look good? I think that's irresponsible. And we were talking about this. And one of the things that I was saying, going back to Boston, because this is pretty much has a lot to do with him. God rest him. But I got to see his blood test results. I was in California with Tony Hughes and Trevor years ago, and Boston was already hooked up with them, and they went to the lab. They drew his lab work and they showed it to me. And he had several markers that were for kidneys and for other things. And those readings were abnormal, which means they were so far above the range that they just were considered abnormal. It couldn't really pick up the reading. And Trevor and Tony hadn't seen that before, so they were asking me what it was. And I had to actually check with someone to find out what it meant, because I had never seen it either. And these are kidney markers. And this was years before he said that there was anything wrong with him. So that when he finally said there was something wrong with his kidneys, and it was because of this peptide, which he irresponsibly took, he said he took a toxic dose of, why would anyone do that intentionally? And why would anyone take a toxic dose for 30 days? Why would you do that? For what point? What point? What makes someone say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a toxic dose of a peptide, which no one knows what it does, because I feel it's responsible for me to be Captain Save You Guys, little bodybuilders, and go figure it out, which, mind you, no one even knew what this peptide was. Nobody was taking it. It wasn't something that anyone was like, it was a popular peptide. It's let me go take something and then tell people what it does. And that's become the culture. That's become this new culture that we're in. And then real coaches, people that have been doing this for a long time, these new guys downplay him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We don't go clean anymore. We just take stuff all year long. This is the new way of doing things. Well, the new way of doing things, what does it lead to? It leads to death. It does. It leads to death. We see this.
Yeah. So what do you say to people, and we were talking yesterday, what do you say to people that, and I told you, I've been, especially lately, I've been been called a talking head or, called a big hypocrite and all that stuff. You saw me before when I was 300 plus pounds. People go, "Oh, dude, you're jacked, you're this, you're that," and and you must be taking this and that. And I keep telling them, I'm like, dude, I'm not. I'm telling you, I'm not taking that. If you saw me before and you see me now, you would understand that I'm not on all that stuff. Literally, I am on HRT that my doctor gives me, and that's what I'm on. I'm not taking a bunch of other stuff. I intermittent fast and all that stuff, but I'm 57 years old. So I'm going to take testosterone pretty much till the day I die. And so people are calling me a hypocrite because I'm out here warning people about what's going on. And my contention is I'm not being a hypocrite. What I'm telling you is, hey, dude, here's what I did. I totally admit it. I'm an open book about it, but don't go the way I'm going. You see, people are interpreting somebody warning now as being a hypocrite when in the past people would say, hey, dude, that's wisdom. Learn from me, learn from my mistake. Now everybody is on this kick where it's like, oh, we know what's best. We know, and you're just a hypocrite because you did it and you're just trying to keep us from doing it.
There's too much of that, and that's basically how people get away with doing things that are just experimental. Is they just downplay the people that have been giving the advice, saying that, hey, this isn't a good idea. We've done this now. Like we said, trend for a competition. Everyone has a different opinion on it. Okay, my personal opinion is if you're going to do it for a competition, it's something you save for the last 3 weeks, and you don't do it the last few days. So we're really only talking about like 3 and 2, not the week 1 of the show. It's just a couple of weeks when you're depleting. It might help you, but that's the only time that I would ever say that you need it. You don't need it for the whole cycle. Now you got people that they literally jump on a pre-contest cycle, and they take, for the whole 12 weeks, they're taking Tren, they're taking Mast, they're taking Winnie, they're taking Primo, they're taking Test. I mean, they're usually taking EQ. They drop that out sometimes. You're taking everything. And I recently was working with someone who was working with another very famous coach, and he had him on that same cocktail. And I'm like, well, you can't use all this. It's not working. So just drop 3 of them. We pick 3, drop 3. You only need 3, and then rotate those. I mean, with the point, you can only take so much, but that's just doesn't seem like it's true anymore. And a big problem with that is these underground labs that are underdosing, misdosing. So now you don't know what information to believe. For example, if Boston took 100 milligrams of tren acetate 7 days a week, and then found out that his stuff was underdosed 50%, then he really only took 50 milligrams 7 days a week. 50 milligrams 7 days a week is still a lot, in my opinion. Okay. Right. But it's not 100 milligrams every day. There's a big difference. So even when someone thinks that they're telling someone the truth, lo and behold, they're not. And what does that end up doing? Now that guy may actually get a real 100 milligrams per ml. And if he does do 100 milligrams a day, he's going to fry his kidneys. He's going to mess his liver up. He's going to mess his lipids up. You know what I mean? And that's a guarantee. There is no way around that. There's no human being or animal, for that fact, that can take trenbolone and not get side effects. It's just not possible. You can't take steroids long term and not get side effects. Okay, even at low doses over a long period of time without going off, you're going to end up having small lacerations in your liver. That doesn't always mean that that's going to lead to cysts or anything like that, but you shouldn't have to have them. It doesn't necessarily need to be there. And let's just face the fact, here we are, guys that are, older, over 40, okay, over 50, over 50. Yeah. And we're talking about taking testosterone replacement therapy. Would we have to do this had we not used steroids?
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
Of course, we can argue the food aspect too, because our food is so bad, and we talk about that. But let's say we were eating a good, healthy diet. I don't think we would. So when I look at people, I tell them, and I'm not being a hypocrite. I'm like, are you sure you really want to go down this road? Now, people can get mad at me, call me a talking head and all that stuff, and I know I had Dave on here the other day, And I got to tell you something, totally misjudged Dave in a lot of ways, I guess. I really like him. I thought he was a really good guy, super charismatic, very knowledgeable. I mean, I don't agree with everything he says, but he doesn't agree with everything I say.
Right.
But we're at a point in our country where nobody can disagree and be friends anymore, you know? And for me, look, just because I disagree doesn't mean I don't think there's value to what Dave is saying in a lot of things. You know,
Right.
I take the meat, leave the bones. Hopefully people will take the meat, leave the bones from what I say.
Right.
Now I hope that people will make better decisions than I made. I mean, I'm 57 years old and I tell people have an enlarged liver. Thankfully, at this point, to our knowledge, there's nothing really wrong. I have an enlarged prostate, but it's not overly enlarged. And so I just go once a year to get it checked. No cancers or anything like that. So I came out, but I didn't come out unscathed. I have cysts in my kidneys, and again, they're just watching those. But you don't come out of this sport unscathed.
And I look back at this myself. Okay. I made some great natural gains from 13 to 15. I put on over 45 pounds. It was just a little bit over 45 pounds because I was like 102. Literally, I was that 100-pound weakling kid. That was really me. And then that one good school year, and my mom sending me oatmeal and Champion weight gainer and Gainer's Fuel. Remember the original?
Yes.
Gainer?
Oh my goodness. Man, that's we talking about a long time ago.
Yeah, we had good supplements back then. I think.
Yeah, we actually did. Most of it tasted like garbage.
Yeah, the metrics base and plus, that was really good back then,
Yeah, but do you remember how bad it tastes? A lot of that.
It was horrible. All of it tastes, and it didn't mix right either. It all mixed horrible.
No, it was terrible.
And now I look back at it right now. I was bodybuilding because I was bullied, right? But I decided to want to be competitive bodybuilding because I was looking at the magazines because that was the only education on weightlifting. It really was the only education on even football players in the 80s were getting their weightlifting knowledge from bodybuilders. Almost, I mean, the gym was that was the home of the bodybuilder. And this is the way it was in the 80s and in the 90s or even in the 70s, let's be honest, okay? And you came to the gym as a football player or whatever, and you would learn how to lift weights from a bodybuilder. I mean, that's how it was. I mean, we were the champions of the gym. Everything started in the petri dish of bodybuilding, even with the drugs, and then went out into cycling for Lance Armstrong, for example, who used EPO, which started in bodybuilding. I mean, all this stuff starts in bodybuilding. That's where the experiments start, and then it goes out into other sports, and then there's people to hide the drugs and all the other stuff like that. They're professionals at that. I look back at my life right now and I say, Jesus, I wasted my entire life on bodybuilding and helping others. Now, was that a bad thing? I haven't really figured it out because I want to say that everybody that I've helped, okay, including what I'm being accused of, okay, has never died or been harmed because of me, ever. Even when we found out, which we found out in 1992. In 1992, we knew Don Long had kidney problems. He lied to everybody. He lied to everyone. I knew because he came out the hospital and his wife said they're going to take him off the insurance because the kidneys problem so bad. So I knew right then there was a problem, and people just lie. And people, again, so I've seen this before. I've seen it before where someone has a health problem. They know it, but yet they're so determined. They want to win. They want to turn pro that they'll ignore that. And now look what ends up happening. He's had dialysis. He had a transplant. His sister had to donate her kidney because she wasn't a match. So he could get up on the kidney line because he was going to die. And really quick, even seeing Don Long again, God bless you, Don, if you see this, man. This isn't no hate against you, but just warning for other kids, man. Sorry. He asked me how to take steroids, and he was on dialysis. And I'm like, dude, are you serious? Like, you want to take steroids still? You're on dialysis, dude. Just give it up.
So do you remember our mutual friend, Daniel Saxton, years ago?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So Daniel, same thing, couldn't get off. And then went through a kidney transplant or dialysis kidney transplant, and then he passed away.
Yeah.
And because guys can't get away from the drugs.
They
You know, and
can't.
people go, the steroids don't kill you.
They do.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh
They
my
do.
God. You know,
They do.
bodybuilding wants to split hairs because it wants to continue doing what it's doing. It wants to continue this facade that steroids don't kill you, and everything's blamed on a genetic predisposition. Well, that genetic predisposition showed up because of the steroids.
Or even Jeff, that looking like this is supposed to be healthy. Man, we are the absolute most unhealthiest people when we're on stage. It's beyond belief how unhealthy. We're literally about to die. I mean, that's how you're supposed to look. I used to joke when Kamali hit the stage, and that's when the night that I met Craig Titus in 1994 at the Collegiate Nationals. Okay, I'm training this kid who was fat. We dieted for over 6 months for that show because he was just delusional. He thought he was too fat, thought he was going to be a heavyweight. And we get there, and he was so appealing. He remembers he couldn't swallow, he could hardly breathe. He was saying, because I had to pull a lot of water from this guy to make weight. We dropped 8 pounds in one night so I could make sure he was a light heavy, because I bolstered up that he's not a real heavyweight, and he wasn't. He could be a heavyweight of 1 pound over. What's that? And I would be like, he's in critical condition or something like that, because we thought it was kind of funny, that we're saying that he's so good, he looks like he's gonna die or something like that, because that's how bodybuilding is. You're supposed to look like you're so peeled that you got nothing left. You know how it is when you're that bone dry. You could split your heel just from being dry. Sean Roden, when he won Mr. Olympia, his voice was crackly because he was so dry. You know what I mean? Like that's how it is. And then we want to say, and this is the only activity, I don't even want to call it a sport, because it's what we do to become what we are is the sport, but the actual sport of this is a beauty pageant. It's what it is.
I've been saying that, and I'm getting a lot of heat for it.
I mean, it is. And there's some people.
It's subjective.
It's subjective. It's not like a boxing where you knock someone out. I mean, that's or
you're not scoring points or all of that stuff. It's totally subjective. Now, again, I'm going to get the haters out there. I'm sure RX Muscle is going to blow up again, calling me names and stuff. But that's okay. I'm not a hater. What I am is, and let me say this. People go, Jeff is a hypocrite. He's so worried about young people, blah, blah, blah. He's saying, but you've got to understand, for 20 some odd years, I worked in the public and private sector with troubled youth.
Right.
Okay. I worked with Judge Alan Brubaker years ago in circuit court in the juvenile probate system with alternative sentencing. I was a special counsel to him, and we were designing alternative sentencing for young people that were at risk. And so I was in the court system, in the probate system. I was in the family system, watching young people taking drugs and, yes, taking steroids and all of that stuff. I was in the private sector for years. I've got a degree in pastoral theology and counseling as well. And so I worked with young people and spoke as a conference speaker for youth and guys that worked with families and pastors. And then I worked as a probate officer in Kokomo or Cocoa, Florida for a while as well, working with troubled youth. And so, when I see this, I have to look back at my own life. And all of those kids thought, oh, dude, he's the coolest guy. He's the coolest guy. Dude, I got on steroids at 13 years old, taking Dianabol from a buddy whose brother was a power lifter. Okay, I was obsessed with it. Before I could write, I was obsessed with it. And so this thing was this obsession. It messes with your mind. And that's the one thing that people don't understand. It changes your mindset. It changes your value system.
It does. Yeah.
Everything your value systems change when you're so loaded out on testosterone and all of that stuff. Dude, you're a horn dog. And so we see a lot of people whose marriages don't make it, their relationships, they jump from one relationship to another. Dude, I told you, we were invited to these parties to wife swap and stuff like that. And I'm like, dude, no way, man.
Yeah.
I don't want your wife, man, and you're
Yeah.
not getting,
Yeah.
and so the moral base of this is just crumbling. And so when I warn people about this lifestyle, it's a lifestyle. And you've got all of these kids on the outside looking in to the fitness world at these fitness influencers who 90% of them are lying anyway. And then bodybuilders who 90% of them are lying anyway. You don't listen, young person. I'm going to give you a warning right now that I want you to listen to from a guy that's been there, done that, wrote the book about it. And honestly, if I could go back and change it, I would, but you can't.
Right.
Hindsight is 2020. Okay. I don't spend my life in regret, but here's the thing. Okay. You do not live with these guys. You don't live with them. You don't see the anger issues. You don't see the mental problems. You don't see the infidelity. You don't see the problems that go on. Oh, you see a full day of eating with so-and-so, or you see all of these other things. Look, social media is nothing more than somebody's best foot forward.
Right.
They don't want you to see that. Look, I'll tell you the truth. Me and my wife, when I got right with God in 2019, my wife was pretty much ready to leave me. We were on the verge of divorce because I was jacked up. She was jacked up. I mean, dude, life was falling apart. And in our moral base was decaying under us. We were hooked on ecstasy and alcohol and all this other stuff. And it's not just the steroids. The steroids is just the beginning of it all. Now, you may have a guy out there, that wants to argue, well, I don't do any of that stuff, or whatever. And what marriage are you on? And if you're on your first marriage and you've got kids, then congratulations, but you're not the norm. You're the exception.
And we have some anomalies. Let's be honest. Okay?
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. They're all.
Ronnie Coleman is an anomaly, but we have to state the obvious. Okay. Ronnie was naive. Ronnie, apparently nobody told this guy that bodybuilding requires steroids. So he made it very far in his career. And to the point where I honestly think for him, okay, he was the one guy that was like, I don't do drugs, I don't do drugs, but this was, prescribed. You know how he talks, it was prescribed to me. Yeah. And that's what he believed. He really associated that as part of being the sport. But he went off. He was we all went off. That was just the way it was. People went off. It was just, there was nobody that really stayed on. The fanboys stayed on, but the actual, which was the funny thing, because all the guys that want to look good walking around at the Arnold Classic, they're really the drug addicts. But the guys who are winning, like Jay Cutler and Ronnie Coleman, they're actually pretty healthy because they go off. They were competing. They had a competitive mindset. And right. Again, what we're finding out more nowadays is, okay, the competitive mindset, the advice to become a competitive bodybuilder has shifted into a dangerous, unhealthy advice. Let's be honest. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that also advice has paradigmed down into being a YouTube influencer.
Right.
And to say that you can look like this and be an influencer. And there's a lot of guys out there who are taking their cycles, putting them forward, saying they did this, showing their results. And it's actually enticing a lot of kids. Why? Because kids are looking for the solution. And when you show them, right, and you show them this image of what's supposed to be health and fitness, and people respect you and they're going to look up to you and you're going to do good. And the reality is it's not. It's a sham. It's a facade for an actual, life of drug addiction.
Right.
And I'm sorry to say that, but it's the truth. And what happens? We know.
Wait. Let's back that up. Let's not rush over that, Ameen. Okay. Let's not rush over that. It's a life of drug addiction.
It's a life of drug addiction. It is.
Look, and you don't truly get out, do you?
No, and that's the problem. I mean, and the problem is that these have damaging effects on you. And the way that I'm saying you don't get out, and I think there's a wave of this reality going on right now, is all of the people that took testosterone, all the men that took testosterone are having issues now with low testosterone. Right. So this was a choice that we made years ago before anyone knew about low testosterone, okay? Yes, there are some significant environmental changes that happened from the 90s to now, specifically having to do with the chemicals sprayed on the food. That's another discussion. We don't want to get censored talking about that. Let's make it clear. However, okay, there are ways around that. And we now know that especially teenagers, they will have lasting damaging as an adult if they take steroids as a teenager. Now, I'm lucky. I was able to have a child, my own child at 42. Okay. I was raising my son's mother's child, my stepson, for years. He was 1 year old, 10 years old when he passed away. He got cancer from 9. He lived from 9 to 10. It was a really rough time. And it was at that point, Jeff, I think you know, my YouTube channel was kind of taking off. I was getting kind of popular, and then the whole thing kind of just took a bridge, and I had to deal with reality. I had to get off YouTube and deal with my, this was something that was breaking me down. And there was one time I realized to myself that, and I was looking at this boy dying, and I'm trying to think to myself, about what life is. And I realized that, we made this choice to take steroids because we were insecure. Let's be honest. That's what it was.
Oh,
okay?
absolutely.
Plain and simple. I'm not going to lie about it. I was insecure. I wanted to look better. I thought there was a solution, and I believe that solution came from the syringe and that bottle. That was what I believed, okay? And I believed that it was healthy, which was the trick. That was the trick. I thought that what I was doing was not drug addiction. I didn't actually associate. I thought, okay, I'm looking better, so because I look better, then this is healthy. And that's not true.
Right.
Looking better doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy, okay? Your blood work is what shows that you're healthy, not the fact that you look good. We can all look good taking drugs. I look back on my life right now, and I think to myself that winning that first show made me want the second show, made me want the third show, and it kept me in there during those years of my life that shape who you are as an adult. And it took me going through this tragedy that I'm going through right now in my life to hit a rock bottom, to realize that all those years I was delusional, following after chasing myself and my own insecurities, when really I need to get back my life by helping others. Because the truth is what could I have done with my life? I mean, think about it. And listen, a lot of bodybuilders, they're happy with what they do, okay? But every single person that I see that's a competitive bodybuilder that does really well, I look at a potential millionaire, maybe a billionaire that just spent their time doing something else. Now, is that important? Now we're seeing that money is important, okay? Right. And the sad thing is that if these kids think that they're going to get somewhere in life really, really far by looking this way, they're taking years off their life to have a good quality of life for a short period of time and trade the sacrifice of never even making it to be 70. Okay. Yeah. I want to be 70. I want to spend time with my child. And you know what? I don't want my child to take steroids. And that's the kicker. When you have kids and you look at your kid and you think to yourself, you want the best for your child. And then you think to yourself, my child's small like me. Do I want him on steroids? What do I do if he gets bullied? And I think as parents, which is a big problem because it started this whole thing, because a lot of the homes are broken, okay? Yeah. So the fathers aren't there, and these kids are finding their father figures in the gym, and they're finding their father figure from that guy that hands them a bottle and a needle. And that in itself is where the problem is that the broken homes, the kids don't have their family, their fathers aren't there to say, son, you don't need to go down that route. That's not gonna help you in life. You're good enough. And that's what we need to tell these kids. You know what? You're good enough. Be the best you can be. But being the best you can be on drugs is not the best you can be. It's not. Yeah. It's the best you can be on drugs.
It's a false reality.
It's a false reality.
And the other thing is now most of these kids will never compete. So it's
No.
not like these kids are working towards an Olympia. Most of these kids will never compete. Social media has brought in an entire new aspect or an entire new shift
Yeah.
in this paradigm. Now we've got people that just want to be popular on Instagram or YouTube or TikTok famous or whatever. They just want to be popular. They just want to be famous. And they're willing to take the drugs to do it, not understanding, what this is doing. This Sam Sulik guy or whatever his name is, you look at this kid and I'm like, this guy is just cramming himself full of drugs. He is eating terribly, all of this stuff. He looks terrible at such a young age. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to make it very long. I mean, you're just, what do you think your longevity is going to be? It's not going to be very good. I'm 57 years old and people go, well, you're 57. How do you look like that at 57? And I tell them, I said, you don't realize from 22 to 41, I didn't walk into a gym. I wasn't in the gym anymore. I was, and people know if you watch my story, I became a Christian early on in my young age. I became a born again Christian and went to Bible college and seminary and worked with young people. And then as a pastor for years. And then like you, I had a daughter that was born sick and I watched her die every day and became angry and bitter at God and went back to bodybuilding at 41 years old. So I had all of those years off of the drugs, came back to it. Of course, everything is advanced. Everything is different and started back again. And then, was in a car accident, paralyzed on my left side for almost 2 years and worked my way back from all of that stuff. But I'm at a point now where I've burned my body up and, getting back to and getting a pro card. And now, I look at people and I'm like, dude, you really want to go this way? Because if you do understand, dude, when I got off in 2019 and I got off, I mean, people don't understand the levels of drugs I was taking. When I got off in 2019 or 2018, 19, I aged like 15 years and in just these 5. I mean, dude, my face looks old, I mean, I went gray really fast, all of that stuff. So, you don't understand that you don't ever truly go off. You never really get out of this. And I agree with you, just like we were talking yesterday, what young people need is not more education. They need men who are there going, dude, I've been there. I've done it. You don't want to do it. Let me show you how we can do this naturally. But at some point, there has to be some responsibility with the NPC and the IFBB to where they're going, okay, we're not going to go this way, but bigger, freakier, better, more money. That's what they're looking for. And so it's never going to change unless something happens. And I thought, honestly, when Washington Post started doing all of those articles on coaches, putting people in the hospital and all that stuff, I thought we were going to start seeing some movement and nothing's happened. It's just drawn it back and here we go.
Because nobody wants, okay, as we know, there's an industry built on this lie. The industry of pre-workouts, the industry of supplements, it's all built on this lie that if you take these things, you look like this. But everyone knows that you go to the gym and you ask the guy and he goes, no, I'm on SARMs. No, I'm on growth. No, I'm on peptides. No, I'm on steroids, and then you have easy access to it now because of the internet. The internet changed everything for everyone. Okay. And you could simply order anything you want off the internet, find out how to take it from 20 different people that you could just type up, how to take Winstrol. It's there, whatever.
Yeah.
But no one's talking about where that's going to lead to. Let's, for example, if you're a hopeless kid and you feel like you need to turn your life around, right? The very first thing that you need is spiritualism. That's the first thing you need, okay? Because you're not going to change anything without God in your life. And it's hard. These young kids, they don't have God in their life because their families aren't together. So a lot of them aren't going to church. Like this new generation, they're really not. God's not in their life. So it's very easy for someone to sell you a false reality, saying, "Hey, you don't God, here, take this," and it's you're young, you're impressionable. So you have two ways it goes, or it goes more than two ways, but the main two ways it goes now is this boy's going to either take steroids or he's going to end up going to this LGBT movement because he's weak, he's getting bullied, he can't find, he's awkward, can't find his place, whatever. He's looking towards to try to make a difference. So he feels there's only two choices. I'm either going to go with this group and they're pretty popular, they're doing good in school, they got no one's beating up on them, or I'm going to have to try and do it myself. So I feel like the beginning part of wanting to change yourself is a good thing, right? But when you think that it's the bottle that's going to make the difference, that's the bad thing. And what we need to do is, as men who've been there before, is tell these kids, hey, listen, I did take steroids when I was a teenager, and honestly, I regret it. And I look back at my life and I really think that if I would have maybe never competed in bodybuilding, I just can't even imagine what my life, what all those years that I did, what it would have become. You know what I mean?
But how much money would I have saved?
How much money would I have saved?
Oh my goodness!
And let's not to forget, man, how inward you become. You become very selfish,
self-focused. You are so self-focused, and you become your own God, little g, right? Because everything is about you. And you're right. People ask me, how did you get out? I was like, dude, I became a Christian back at 22, I believe it is. And then for years and years walked with God. And then for 15 years ran from God, just angry and bitter because, I watched my daughter die every day for 2 years. And that does something to you, right? So in 2019, man, I got my life straightened out, man. I was like, God, I repent of all of this stuff. But, we were going down this bad road and, life was leading to nowhere. And the entire time the Lord was there, man. The Bible says the goodness of God leads you to repentance. And we have second, third, and fourth generation unchurched kids now. We don't talk about the Lord anymore. We don't talk about God. There is nobody out there telling kids, hey, man, God loves you, and for you, in order to you to find out who you really are, you got to find the Lord first, man. Because once you find God, once you find the Lord Jesus, and you get that forgiveness and you start to understand who you are in him, then dude, life changes. And you don't have to have all the drugs. You don't have to have the fame and and all that stuff, which, by the way, I mean, you're chasing something that the devil is always going to try to keep out here. And it's just out of your reach. How many of you actually think you're going to win a Mr. Olympia?
I mean, but even if you do, what is that? It just
what do you get?
You're a guy
grabbing the wind.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you want to know what my IFBB Pro card is worth? You don't want to know what it's worth? Honestly, I go out and I go to Starbucks. If I pull out my if I pull out an IFBB Pro card and $6, I can get a cup of coffee. It's you nothing. It doesn't anything. People go, oh well, you're this, you're that. It's the ticket. It's not the ticket to anything. The Bible says it's vanity. It's grabbing the wind. When you open your hand up, the wind is gone. You can't see it. It does nothing for you. Okay? We
sit there and we think also that it's a key to getting girls, because that's another big illusion too, right? You're going to find out real quick.
Sexual satisfaction is nothing more than the wind. But you know what? The Bible says your eye is never filled with seeing. Your ear is never filled with hearing. You cannot see enough. You cannot get enough. You cannot lust enough after girls. You can jump from girl to girl to girl. And I did that. But I'm telling you, you find out in the end, you're unsatisfied. Look at all these guys that end up in the bodybuilding world. They end up, years later, and they've been through how many relationships, they've been through how many women. Now, not all, but a lot do, right? And but a lot of them, if you look, there's a lot of infidelity and things like that there as well. And so there's a moral base that is eroded there. And so when you look at all of this lifestyle, what I'm telling you is find the Lord first. Find God. Find the fact that who you are doesn't need to be wrapped up in your body, because I got news for you. Your body was never intended to look like what I look like.
No. And we have to be honest, because I think people need to know this, Jeff, that, at a very young age, when you decide to take steroids, if you decide to take steroids, okay, what you're ending up doing is you're bridging your life further from God, because the truth is that you're supposed to protect the temple that the Lord gave you. Right. And it's our sacred temple. It's our body. And when you think that, polluting it and doing all these other things, it's all against what God wants. It's against God. I can't stress it enough. Bodybuilding, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's okay. It's okay if you want to do it. And I'm not saying it's not something to do, but understand what you're doing. Just know what you're doing.
Or go work out, be fit. I love the gym, man. Go to the gym, work your brains off, man. But don't do it this way, because you're going to ruin yourself in so many ways.
I know kids that get ready, they're playing. It used to be different, but now they're playing football, they're playing baseball. They're not getting into steroids. They're not, because they're going to be tested. They're not. But you can't do that with bodybuilding. And so all I'm saying is that before you decide that you want to get into bodybuilding, just understand that all the things that it's going to do, it's going to take you further away from God. You're going to lose your spiritualism. Now you can look at some of these guys and say, okay, like for example, Derek Lunsford, he's a big practicing Christian, talks about God all the time, but he brings God first and foremost in his life. He says it. I do all this for Christ.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to call your time out there. I just did a video recently on, can Christians take steroids? All right. If we break it down to the very first fact that steroids are still illegal, right there as a Christian, you already know you shouldn't do it. Sorry, but that's the truth. Okay, I'm just saying that's the truth. The second thing is, the Bible says your body is not your own. You're bought with a price. Therefore, right, exactly. Glorify your God in your body and your spirit, which are God's.
Right.
That means you are taking an illegal drug. You are putting in your body to do something to glorify yourself. You're not doing it to glorify God. That right there is strike number 2. Then you are getting up on a stage. You are glorifying yourself. You are saying, look at this beautiful body I have built. Right. What did Nebuchadnezzar do? He walked out onto the portico in Babylon and he said, is not this the great Babylon that I have built for my might and my glory? And what did God tell him? He said, you're a fool and I'm taking your kingdom from you. And he drove him out into the wilderness to live 7 years like an animal, right? There is no way you can tell me getting up on a stage, flexing and posing is for God's glory. Now, look, all I'm saying is, you say, oh man, you're dogging Derek Lunsford. I'm not dogging Derek Lunsford. What I'm saying is those 3 things alone disqualify me as a Christian from being in bodybuilding. Okay. Sorry.
I agree.
Now that's not going to.
No. I agree with you. And part of the problem is that, and I like Derek. Honestly,
No, I'm sure he's
honestly, I think, there are Christians that commit adultery. There are Christians that are alcoholics. There are Christians that doesn't make
not
you
saying
worse.
We don't fail.
No, we have, right. But I think it would be helpful for somebody like him, or even, Lee Haney, who was, we all know, is a big believer in Christ, talks about the Lord, stuff like that, to say something about this. And they don't. Why don't you say something? Why don't you tell people that, hey, this is a selfish sport. We do take drugs. This is what it's really about. And I really don't recommend that kids go down this route, but we don't. Instead, what we have are kids seeing that a practicing Christian in every way is going to be possibly Mr. Olympia this year. And they look up to that and they say, hey, I can still be a Christian and I can do these drugs. And that's false. That's not the way.
Let me tell you something. And let me tell you something. The Bible, which is the ultimate authority as far as I'm concerned for faith and practice, the Bible says this. It said, if you offend one of these little ones, it's better for you to tie a millstone around your neck, which is a huge, heavy stone, tie it around your neck and throw yourself in the ocean and drown yourself.
Right.
Okay. Now, I have kids that have asked me about, well, Derek Lunsford gets up there and says, I want to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ after he wins. Right. Okay. Wait a second. God never tells you to do wrong to do right. Never does. He never tells you to do wrong by taking anabolic steroids that are illegal, by putting a drug into your body that is not designed for that purpose. Those drugs were all designed for different things. They were not designed to just make your body into a freak show.
No, they weren't designed for vanity. No,
they were not designed for that. So you are using a drug that is that was designed for different purposes to bring about something that is not natural, that God never intended our bodies to be. Okay. Now, people are going to call me a hypocrite and all this stuff. What I'm doing is I'm warning people, don't go the way I went. I'm trying to help you understand what God has shown me in my life, how I erred in my life, and how my life had to be different, had to change in 2019. And it did. I'm down from well over 300 pounds. I sit around right now at about 238 to 240. I'm not loaded out on drugs. I have to take testosterone or I literally can't even function at 57 years old. I'm not on an excess amount. I'm on what the doctor allows me to be on. But here's the thing. It's never right to do wrong to do right. In other words, it's never right for me to take a drug illegally, violate God's word, violate everything that God says, so that I can get up on a stage, glorify myself, and then when it's all over, tell everybody, oh, God is for me. I want to thank Jesus for this. Sorry, right. If Derek wants to get on my show and he wants to argue the point, I invite you on. Let's go. Okay, let's talk about it. Tell everybody why and how you justify this in your mind and to people, because I got Christian teenage kids that are coming to me going, wait a minute, you're saying that it's wrong, but Derek is a Christian and Derek says it's okay.
Right. And that's
so who's being the hypocrite? Who's being the hypocrite?
Well, I mean, it's okay. Derek's not being a hypocrite. He's not being up forth with people about what else is going on. You know what I mean?
Okay, wait a minute. If by definition people are calling me a hypocrite because I'm out there warning people now, because I used to do it, and I'm warning people are out there calling me a hypocrite, okay, then how does that preclude, or how does Derek get off how does Derek get off and people don't call him a hypocrite?
It's like the pastor who sleeps with his parishioners, right? And he says, I did wrong, forgive me. I did wrong.
But wait a minute. Does that not qualify him as being hypocritical?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so by definition, Derek Lunsford is being hypocritical. You can't say it any other way, because
but I don't
kids
think he
are out there struggling with this truth.
I don't think he knows it, though. I don't think he knows it. I think because he used, and this is the thing, he used from my understanding, I could be wrong, but I think he used bodybuilding to overcome drug addiction. But what ends up happening is that you just shift from an addiction of the mind in one way to an addiction of the mind seeing your body in another way. It's still an addiction. There's nothing really changed.
I was going to say, you traded one addiction for another.
That's it. And I actually, it took me to do Ibogaine to realize that I was addicted to bodybuilding, not to the steroids. There's a difference too. Yeah. A lot of us are addicted to bodybuilding. We're addicted to the look. We're not necessarily addicted to the drugs. We're addicted to the look. Then there's those that are addicted to, right. And it's all against what the Lord wants us to look like. Okay. That's plain and simple. This is not healthy. People are dying, and they're dying. And there's a lot of people that are dying. I believe that it's a combination of the blood getting thicker from, and also steroids too. I think both are a bad combination, and we're seeing that. And we're seeing that a lot, especially because a lot of these people had to travel. They had no choice. They had to do it in order to travel. So when you give into that and you say, okay, you go into the risks of not knowing what mixes and what doesn't mix with that particular thing. We've already seen that particular thing had a lot of issues. Okay. Again, we could talk about a lot of big people. Again, this is, during COVID times, what happened to me in 2021 happened during COVID time. And it just so happens that the person that is in question, we know is
so let's talk about, okay, so let's get into the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, let's talk
so
about
and I know you have to be careful. You can't say a lot.
Right.
Okay.
They put a restraining order against me from talking about the case, but I can talk about myself and what isn't directly related to the case. Some of the things I've been through recently, but that aren't specifically related to the case.
Okay, so you were working with a bodybuilder named Andy Heyman.
Correct.
Okay. He passed away in 2021.
Right.
And from a pulmonary embolism.
That's what they said.
That's what they said. Now, he had a medical history of a lot of different things from what we understand, correct?
Correct.
I mean, things that are public knowledge.
Correct.
Okay.
He had, it's already out there that he had a history of pulmonary embolisms. He had a history of clotting. He was on clotting medication during the time this happened. He was in the hospital right before it happened for an operation on his tricep, which had an infection on it that they had to clear up. And he was suffering from alcoholism, which he had been suffering for several years. I think at least 7 years, but the past 2 years, this is in 2021, so 2021, his father had passed away and he'd become very bad with the alcohol problem, which is why he sought me out.
Do we know, or we at least strongly suspect he had this, correct?
Yes, very, very, very strongly suspect because of one of the underlying conditions, which we've seen with a lot of this, is myocarditis, fibromyocarditis, and so, which is basically like a fiber clot that thickens in the blood.
Right.
And which can lead to PEs, it can lead to blood clots, it can lead to all these issues.
And that with steroids and alcoholism is a lethal combination.
And being over a certain weight, because a lot of the guys that have been at risk were people that were very, like over 250, the big guys. And we were seeing a lot of this too. It's very unfortunate this happened at my home. Okay. He came to my home a few hours later, that happened.
And you were giving him, I mean, you were wearing CPR on him too, correct?
I did everything. I called the ambulance immediately. There was no hesitation. I did CPR on him immediately. I knew that there was no bringing him back. He was blue, and he turned blue very, very fast because I was only upstairs for maybe 2 minutes. Okay, I have a video of him right before this happened. He was perfectly fine. And so what happens when you get a blood clot in your lung, okay, is your lung's still pumping oxygen, but the blood's not going through. So it pulls you and makes you blue. That doesn't happen any other way. Okay. You won't turn blue for hours. That's not how it is. And if you're going to overdose, there's time where you're overdosing where you can be saved. We've seen this. That's why Narcan works for people that are overdosing. They're like this for like 5, 10, 15 minutes. They get a spray of Narcan. They come back to life. There's time. They don't turn blue. They're not like unresponsive. They're responsive. So there was a lot of issues that actually happened that show that there was a real pulmonary embolism and it wasn't an overdose. An overdose would have come with several of the following markers, which are all indications for every overdose: vomiting, shaking, nervousness, all these things that come through. It's not just done right away. The only way that type of thing can happen right away is if it's like intravenous or you smoke something or something like that. Nothing that has to be metabolized can make you die like that quick. You know what I mean? Unless it's a straight poison, Right.
Right. So, so he died.
Yeah.
2 years later.
Yep.
People show up at your door. You're arrested for his death.
That's correct. And I'm on bond right now on my signature, and I am facing life in prison, but I'm innocent. And I have evidence that shows that I'm innocent. Okay.
Right.
Um, there's a lot of facts in this case which have been misconstrued, but I hope to God that things go see the light. I'm already working on a civil case to sue and in return after all this to get my life back in order. It's really unfortunate that this happened, but I can say one thing is it brought me closer to God. That this experience, that it's taken everything from me. Right now, if you guys want to help somebody going through a struggle, I'm going through a struggle right now, and I could use all the help I can get. And it's
So
hard.
let me stop right there. So how do people find you? I'm going to put in the description below how people can help out with your. You actually have a GoFundMe account.
I have a spot fund me, yeah, which is a little
Oh,
different than GoFundMe because they pay more instead of advertisement.
okay. All right. So that will be below. How do people find you on Instagram and all of that? And what is your email so people can, if they want to contact you as well?
So my email is guruameenalai@gmail.com, and that's GURUAMEENALAI@gmail.com. And my Instagram is at guru_Ameen_Alai. So you could reach me and DM me on Instagram, and we'll leave my spot fund down below. We're unfortunately now it's going to be very difficult right now. I'm already exhausted all of my means to make this happen, which is part of what they do to you. They drain your finances. Now you getting help from my retired mother using her retirement, which is very difficult because she doesn't really have that much. She spent her life raising her sons, my brother and I. And the federal government's going to be in a shutdown come October 1st, which means my case is going to be delayed even further, possibly till February of next year. So this is going to be a very difficult winter for me. I hope I don't end up going homeless, losing my apartment, as I pretty much I've had to slowly downsize and get rid of everything. I have God in my life, and I know that I'll overcome this. I can tell you that I feel stronger than ever. I don't for one second in me, I don't feel as if I'm going to lose at all. I know that I'm going to win. I know that I'm good, but I can say that I still to this day feel a deep remorse for the family. I always have. We prayed together, Andy and I. We prayed on his sobriety. We asked God for help, and unfortunately, the Lord wanted Andy to be with him, and that's something that we all have to live with. It was very sad for me to have to go through that. I can honestly say that I'm traumatized from having to give him, as he was dead, CPR is very difficult. I thought that watching my stepson die would have been the hardest thing for me. And then I was helping people get off of drugs by using Ibogaine, which is a Schedule 1 drug in the United States. However, Colorado recently decriminalized it. So along with a bunch of other Schedule 1 drugs like psilocybin, they call them magic mushrooms or stuff like that, which we're finding are actually being very beneficial for PTSD and depression, and aren't really considered to be recreational drugs because nobody really wants to kind of do them. They kind of like they're not it's not like alcohol or anything.
Right.
And so they've been finding ways to help people combat depression and PTSD, and at the same time with Ibogaine helping people get off of drugs. Now we're going to see a wave of detoxing clinics that are going to open up in Colorado, and basically the government wants to try to prevent that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, I mean, it was awesome to have you today. I know we are going to do a couple of different things together, and I'm looking forward to those. Man, I tell you, a wealth of knowledge and I think wisdom as well. Unfortunately, the hard things in life make us a lot wiser. And just like I said yesterday, sometimes God takes us to a point where he's all we have so that we finally understand that he's all we need.
Absolutely.
And I have been there myself, down, out, broken, lost everything I had. And I've been there. So I feel for you. Again, all of Ameen's information will be below. Guys, we thank you for coming in today. We will be doing more with Ameen, so look for that in the coming days and weeks. And again, Ameen, thank you for coming in. God bless you.
Thank you.
The impact.